Welcome to People Don't Think, Let's Start Today, a podcast hosted by Norb Savannasini, founder of AmericanEagle.com, and Al Edwards. Norb, they let us behind the microphones again. How you doing?
Very good. You know, today is another day, a gift that we get every day. That's why they call it the present.
Indeed.
And this week, something happened very interesting that I'd like to start this whole podcast with, is that there's been all over the news, like if it was really a discovery, and everything else today is a discovery that things that we knew, but you can check it now. I guess it's official because the media has covered it. People that are optimists live on the average of 4 years longer, about the same as people who exercise regularly. And for you people that don't know me, I am a big believer in Mark Twain's theory on exercise, which he said, whenever I get the urge to exercise, I sit down and wait for the urge to leave. Now,
I love that.
If I can change being optimist from exercising and get the same benefits, my God, I mean,
why do it?
Absolutely. It's because there's nothing that I read where exercise will extend an additional 4 years.
Right,
so
just the regular 4 years.
Right, just being optimist. So, it helps. So I don't do it for that. I'm just happy that I've been doing it.
Exactly. That's funny. Well, I know for sure you're going to live to be about 140, Norb, with all the optimism you've had.
I don't want that. But
all the positive thinking you've done in your life, so that's for sure. Well, that's awesome. I definitely believe that optimistic thinking will help you live not only a better life, but a longer life. There's no question about that.
Well, it's been proven now, scientifically.
Yeah.
So I think it's something that we just expect as fact. So just like, they promote exercising all the time and do this and do this and do this. Well, being optimistic is something that should be promoted just as much. And I don't know if I can get on TV and sell any kind of equipment to make me rich selling this stuff for physical experiences. Being, optimistic is very cheap, actually. It doesn't cost anything.
Right. And the treadmill industry is going to shut you down for that kind of
Absolutely.
philosophy. You can't sell anything if you're just thinking positively. So that's great. Well, today we have a special show because I think it's on a topic we have talked about a lot around it, but never directly. And we really need to give the credit for this show to your grandson, Frank, who came up with this great idea.
Yeah, right.
And that is that the United States itself was founded as an optimistic endeavor. And I've been doing some reading this week about that and about truly how the founding fathers, particularly the signers of the Declaration of Independence, were real optimists to the point of danger, which we'll talk about in a second. But Norb, let's talk about that. Why do you feel the United States is truly the greatest optimistic nation that's ever existed on this earth?
Well, it's kind of an interesting thing that when you think about, human history, of the history we're aware of, which let's say it's probably 6,000 years old, from the Chinese period, and then of course the Greeks, the Romans. There's always been this incredible belief that you have to have these leaders that control everything and dominate the people, and wars were started because of all kinds of different things, and killings were normal. If you look at the Aztecs, the sacrifices they did and everything else, there was very little respect for human life. And I think that on the Declaration of Independence, when we actually gave, these rights that are given to us by a superior being that cannot be, really trampled across, America was the only country that gave the individual this idea that he was unique and that he could be whatever he wanted to be. And cornball as it sounds, in the pursuit of happiness, because what makes people happy is totally different. You might be happy, playing marbles, and I might be happy swimming. Before this, there used to be a unified thought of what was the right thing to do, how to dress, how to do this, what to eat, how to eat it. And America, basically said, if you're happy, and as long as you don't impose on somebody else's territory, you can do whatever you want. And that optimism created the United States of America, which whether you like it or not, it changed the history of the world and put it into, the modern era, if you want to call it the modern era. Because up to now there were a lot of eras, but I think that the U.S. could be best described as the modern era, where things really, really changed. Interestingly enough, we were talking today about air conditioning. Today in Chicago happens to be, close to 100 degrees, and it's not comfortable. I grew up when I was a kid in a town in Argentina, Buenos Aires, which is a very large city, and I didn't have air conditioning. And my thoughts of the worst times in my life were when it was, 100 degrees and humid, and I couldn't sleep. My pillow was soaked with sweat. And when I came to this country, I remember in 1953, the first thing my father did was buy a window air conditioner. And we all enjoyed that. And, the average American today doesn't realize, how great it is, not to be uncomfortable in the hot summer months, and how to be comfortable in the cold winter, because America, it brought all this to the world. And basically these were from people that had this imagination. My God, I'm going to, make this thing that'll make the places cool. And nobody ever thought about that before. They would go into caves. I visited Mark Twain's hometown in Missouri, Hannibal, Missouri, and they have caves there, and they're very famous. Mark Twain wrote a lot about these caves, and the people would go in the summertime and spend their day, or a lot of the day, in the caves because it was so hot outside. And it's kind of funny because they actually, the caves have a lot of riding and stuff, and there was life in the cave, running away from the heat. Today, you go home and you have a refrigerator and the food is fresh, and this is something that you have to really appreciate, and basically it came from the thoughts of our forefathers, the guys that actually sat down and wrote that Constitution.
I think there's no question there's a direct connection between how this country was founded and the unprecedented amount of innovations that this country has produced. Certainly things have been done in other countries, but I think for, the 246 years that we've been around, no country has accomplished, what we have in such a, relatively short amount of time. It's almost scary to me in a good way how similar we think, because for the last 2 days, I've been walking around talking to people about air conditioning.
and believe me that we haven't talked about this before this at all.
We never rehearse these, folks, which is clearly very evident. You can tell the minute you start listening that we have not rehearsed this. But I've been walking around talking to people. Aren't you glad you live in a world with air conditioning and how amazing it is? And people normally look at me like I'm nuts, like they normally do. But that sense of wonder, we talked about it in another podcast, that sense of wonder about washing machines and cars and air conditioners and podcast studios and microphones. I mean, this stuff always did not exist. It wasn't always here.
Yeah, right. And a very short time in human history, when you think about, the few thousand years in human experience, what has been accomplished is just almost unimaginable.
It definitely is. And
Yeah.
I think the seed of all that, it's not a coincidence that so much innovation, so much change, so much advancement has taken place as a result of the United States. And I think it's that founding philosophy that really has been the springboard for so much of that. Let's talk about probably one of the most famous quotes that Thomas Jefferson wrote in the Declaration of Independence, and that is that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah, and like I mentioned before, it's basically, I like to call it American cornball, which I appreciate very much because I think that's part of being positive.
I can't get enough of cornball, by the way, so just go
yeah,
ahead.
no.
I love it.
Plus, Al has always eaten a lot of corn also. So.
That's right. I'm full of cornball, folks.
So, it's really interesting because that produced a society that even today, even with all the problems we face, there is an element of positiveness in the United States that has remained. And a few of us are trying, basically what this program is trying to awaken the public and have them learn about, how incredible this country was positive. You have to think about this. Any place you go in the world, even today, you have American shows on television. And you can go to Japan and they have, obviously they're dubbed, but you have Seinfeld and you have Lucy and you have all these shows that actually produce laughter. And this is one of the things about being positive, is the laughter. America has produced more laughter than just about anybody. I think that, if I'm not mistaken, I don't want to quote it and say that it's a perfect quote, but the gist of it is that Walt Disney says the most precious export that the United States has is laughter. And that's something really interesting that nobody ever talks about. America laughs a lot. If you go to other countries, say, well, people are more serious. Yeah, because they don't laugh enough. And one of the traits of America is that we can laugh at each other. God only knows that Al and I, laugh at each other all the time and, make comments that might not be socially acceptable, but it causes us to laugh. And you know what? That is more important than anything else. As long as you don't offend anybody or you do something that is not funny, because it can be funny and draw the attention of some flaw or a shirt, like, Al sometimes wears shirts that, I probably laugh at, and he laughs at some of the shirts I wear, but we laugh about everything, and I think that's very important in life. And America has created more laughter than any other society has ever created.
Yeah, I agree with that. And when you look at the world culture, many countries have their own culture, of course, but when you think about the influence the United States has had on all cultures in the modern age, I can't think of any other nation that has permeated other nations like we have. Like you said, the Japanese seem like they're obsessed with American things, baseball, pizza, and like you said, Seinfeld and I Love Lucy and all this kind of stuff. And they're very proud of their own culture in the thousands of years, but they just seem to really grab onto the American way of life.
Yeah, you travel all over the world and you see, ads and American brands splattered all over. I mean, your Coca-Cola, McDonald's. McDonald's introduced fast food to the world, and for some reason or other, it's not something that I consider positive about America, but I guess a lot of people are happy eating a Big Mac or fries, and the American brands just permeate the world, and obviously the airplanes and the televisions and the microwave ovens and air conditioning, all that was created here. But one of the interesting things also that I found is that, I think I mentioned before in one of the podcasts, is that my grandsons are listening to 1950s music. And I've even started listening to Bing Crosby, which is 1940s. And I don't know if any one of you have ever listened to Bing Crosby, but I recommend you do. And just say, play anything Bing Crosby, and all the songs were positive. They were happy. And if you listen to Bing Crosby, you are not listening to something that, is talking about something that is a bad thing that's happening in the world today. It was about, being happy and young at heart and
love.
Love and all good stuff, which is probably the greatest thing that this country also contributes. Laughter and good music. Because if you look at music from other countries, which is also beautiful music, I'm not knocking it, but the Italian opera is usually tragedy, and the French songs are usually sad songs about the falling leaves and things like that. America came up with happy songs. So that's part of being positive,
That's a great point. Going back to Bing Crosby, I'm still listening to Fats Waller from about 1925, which is another great thing. If you've ever not heard of him, folks, I recommend it. Kind of a piano player. Al Jolson, all these names.
Yeah.
Your second favorite Al, right? Al Jolson. Or maybe he might be the first.
No, the first.
First one, yeah, of course. That's what I thought. I walked right into that one, folks. I'll tell you that. As we're thinking about the foundation of all this all these great things that have come out of this country. I want to talk a little bit about some of the founders themselves. There were 56 founders, or 56 signers, I should say, of the Declaration of Independence. I looked it up, and it's very interesting to note a great majority of them were lawyers, which is interesting. You had a lot of different occupations. You had lawyers, merchants, doctors, landowners. Ben Franklin was a scientist and a printer. A lot of farmers. The thing I want to talk about, Norb, with you is that it's easy for us to get out of bed every morning and be optimistic because that's how we want to be. The guys that signed the Declaration of Independence literally put their lives on the line because when they signed that document, they were going to be brought up on charges of treason from Britain, from King George. And these are not just kids that had nothing to lose. They had a lot of things to lose because they were quite well established in their lives. So it really inspires me to think about, it's one thing to just, like I said, want to be a positive person, but boy, how many people are willing to literally risk their lives for a philosophy or for a way of life that they feel is more important than any material things that they might have?
There's an old feeling or thought that if you leave the world a little better than when you found it, you've done your job. And when you think about all the evil in the world, I believe that when the founders of this country, these 56 guys, they sat down together and they actually believed that, they could create a better world. And that belief is optimism in something better. And they had faith, There's an old saying, and I'm going to screw up this saying like crazy, but if you plant a tree that you'll never see, but your offspring will see, you've done a good job. And I know that that's a terrible way to say it, but you get the gist of it.
Absolutely.
And I think that this is what these guys did. They actually planted a seed and that they knew they would never see, but they were just convinced that, this was a breakthrough in humanity. Not only just a new government, but in humanity itself. Because nobody ever did this before. Right. Nobody.
And I think at the time they even knew the gravity of it, even though they had strong characters enough to push forward with it. I read a very interesting quote, which I didn't even realize. Dr. Benjamin Rush of Pennsylvania was one of the signers, and he was a doctor. He said he remembered the atmosphere in the Continental Congress in Philadelphia when the delegates affixed their signatures to the Declaration of Independence. He said he described the atmosphere as a pensive and awful silence pervaded the House as we were called up one after the other to the table of the President of Congress. What was believed by many at the time to be our own death warrants. The British government considered the Declaration of Independence a treasonous document, and treason was a capital crime. You want to talk about courage. Boy, I don't know. I'm not sure I could, I like being alive and all the other stuff I have, a car and a house and stuff like that. Giving that up, or the potentially giving that up for a belief, is pretty powerful. It's something I'm not sure myself and many people could even contemplate.
No, and obviously that's a decision that I think throughout history many people have made, and I happen to like movies a lot, and I've always said they never make movies out of people that agree with the masses. The movie is always made by that one man who stands alone and defeats, whatever the odds are. He does what he thinks is the correct thing to do. And here you had a group of 56 people. I think that, I don't know if you have the history of these guys, but most of these guys were killed. And most of these guys ended up extremely poor. They lost all their wealth. A lot of them lost their whole families. So it wasn't just that they worried about it was going to be treason. The British actually did come in and managed to get rid of a lot of them.
Yeah.
And of course that war lasted for many, many, many years. But the idea that this was a better country, you had the right to be your own person, which is the greatest thing. And going back to being positive, having that kind of heritage, this is the path we choose. And being positive is a path. And you have to basically say, I am going to be positive. We had a heck of a storm 2 days ago here, and it was incredible. And I always like it because I think that, the good Lord gives us things that we can't control, thank God. But it was hailing, and it was storming, and it was wind, and it was just incredible. And there was a little bird. I have a little balcony, and I bought a plant. The other day, my daughter was at home, and she went over there to water the plant, and the bird flew away, and there was a little egg there.
Wow.
And it was a dove. She got really scared because it flew out, But I'm thinking to myself, how incredible that is? We put the plant out there. This little bird has this faith that egg was put in there, and they're sitting on it. And then I took a picture of the mate waiting for the other mate to leave. I didn't know which one was the male or the female, but I guess they take turns sitting on the egg. But it's really an incredible thing about nature, because they have that positive knowledge that was going to create a little bird, and life keeps on. Another cornball thing, but you can't. How beautiful that is! You see all these birds, and every one of these birds came out of a little egg.
It is amazing.
It is amazing.
It is amazing. What Norb is not telling you, friends, is that he had one hell of a breakfast the next morning too.
Yeah. Well, I actually told my daughter, "Can we take that egg out and do something with it?" And of course, she didn't share that humor.
That was frowned upon.
Yeah.
But I don't think you could get much of a sunny side up egg from a dove egg. They're pretty small.
No, they're very small.
You'd have to have about 20 of them, I think, to get anything going.
Yeah.
But you mentioned that movies were usually about the guy or the lady that risks it all and goes after the dream and all that. And I heard something recently that really means a lot to me, and it is that they have never erected a statue of a critic.
Oh, exactly.
It's always the people who actually take a stand and go and do something that they put up statues to. They've never, all the negative people, you never see a statue. You never see the museum of negative people.
No, this is very interesting because obviously, I hate to repeat this, but Al and I never say what we're going to talk about. But my father had a really interesting thing. He said two things, that the easiest thing in the world was to spend money. He says you could give a monkey money and they knew how to spend it. They'd go to the shop and they could figure out that money bought stuff.
And I want to see a monkey go shopping too. That would be good.
And the second easiest thing in the world was to be a critic. And to be a critic, you don't have to have any credentials. You don't have to do anything. I don't like this, or this man is bad, or this woman is bad. And these people in our society right now, I want to talk a little bit about negativity, what's surrounding us today, are people that are critics. And these people have no credentials at all. What defines a critic? Nothing. It doesn't take any education. It doesn't take any smarts. It doesn't take anything. I mean, most really ignorant people that I've met in my life, and I'm sure that you agree with this, are pretty stupid. And unluckily, some of them are good looking, and they're paid a lot of money to be on TV and to criticize stuff instead of, wondering about that little dove egg, which is really something to be happy about.
Right.
So, it's kind of interesting. That was my dad's two statements.
I love that. I'm going to definitely keep that in mind. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Here in Chicago, for many years, those of you who are from here, you may have remembered or know about Richard J. Daley, the original Mayor Daley, who was mayor from 1955 to 1976. And he always took critics to heart. It really bothered him. And he'd always say right back, they were critical about this program or this initiative he was doing, whatever. And he would always look at him and say, "Where's your program? Let's see how well yours worked." And of course, it never had one, but it's easy to be a critic,
Oh, absolutely.
Send us a postcard, folks, if you ever find a statue of a critic. I don't think there's one ever there.
Mayor Daley had one thing that I loved, is that one time a reporter said, Mayor Daley, I understand that, you give a lot of these contracts to your friends. And he responded rapidly. He says, what am I going to give it to, my enemies?
Right, exactly.
Which is really common sense.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that from a political sense, he was probably one of the greatest comeback guys that
Yeah.
I've ever seen, which is totally lacking today. Totally lacking. This
absolutely.
spontaneous, funny response,
Yeah.
and positive in a way. Who am I going to give it to? My friends?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's stupid.
yeah, exactly.
So
I want to talk about the modern American dream. And Norb, I think you are uniquely qualified to talk about this. As some of our listeners might know, the Savannasini family emigrated here from Argentina in the early 1950s. You were a young boy. Your father was a pioneer in the television business, in the manufacturing business of television. And you came here as a 12-year-old boy to Bloomington, Indiana, which at that time was a little small town. Your family, obviously, is just the epitome, the Norman Rockwell painting version of the American dream. Talk about the American dream, and I don't believe it's gone. I believe it's very much still here. It's changed.
No. I'll tell you something really interesting. I'm glad you brought that up. There's a lady that works here that has 2 twin sons, and they're 18 years old, and they're really hardworking kids. They decided that after high school, they wanted to open up a shop to do detailing on cars. This happened about maybe 6 months, a year ago. And these 2 kids that are obviously 19 maybe now are so busy that it's just incredible. And they're doing cars like Ferraris and Lamborghinis and Mercedes and old Packards.
And even a Toyota Camry, I heard.
Yeah, well, Toyota Camry, because the guy needed a favor. They felt bad for him. But the one interesting part about it is that the dream is still here. The dream is still here. Now, you have to close your eyes to these people that are critics, what we brought. This is part of being optimist. Close your eyes to these people. These are well-paid, good-looking, basically mindless people that will prostitute themselves for a salary and say whatever they're given to say. There isn't an original thought in all of television land. That's part of optimism, is how to eliminate that pessimism. And these people that are not there to make you happy. They're there to talk to you about global warming and the price of gas and how bad things are and this and that, which creates this snowball that's rolling down a hill. And the more you talk about it, the worse it gets, because that's what people talk about. But these are 2 19-year-old kids that are going to be wealthy one day, because, this is just the beginning. Pretty soon they'll be making so much money that they'll have to put it in a bank. And then after they put it in the bank, they got to figure out, well, what stocks are we going to buy? And what are we going to do with this money? And then we're going to buy a building. And then they hire more people. And all of a sudden, they'll be very successful, which, if that's the definition of success, yes, I think that's the definition of success. When you can provide jobs for people, that, I believe, is to be a success. I don't mean political jobs, because those are just basically based on tax dollars, which are not creating a job at all. But I'm talking about creating something that does not hamper the taxpayer. So today I think that, I don't think it's as easy. I'm not going to say that, but the challenges are still there, and I think this still is a very, very positive. I don't know of any other country where you could do what you can still do here.
Absolutely. Well, folks, as usual, our show is the Stream of Consciousness show. We're like, taking out a bottle of bubbles in the wind and just blowing bubbles and seeing wherever it goes. And thankfully, we normally come back somehow to the topic. But as you think about some of the things we talked about in your mind, say a little prayer of gratitude that these men 200 plus years ago were courageous and committed enough to build a land where we can have achieved what we have in this country.
Yeah, they planted the trees, and we're actually, right now enjoying the fruits of their beliefs.
Absolutely. So I think none of us should ever forget that, and be incredibly proud to be Americans, and incredibly lucky, because I think a lot of people in this world from other nations would literally die to be an American. They would love
absolutely.
it. So. Well, friends, great to be with you again. As Norb always says, enjoy every day. It's a gift. That's why they call it the present. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us.
Bye-bye.